Hello and welcome to another edition of DIY Musicians Talking Music. Today, it's a pleasure to be speaking with Tyler from the Just Imagine. So, Tyler, you were saying that you're just about to release your first album, which contains 6 singles you previously released and 7 new unreleased tracks. So let's start talking about that then.
Yeah. Thanks. First and foremost, thanks for having me on, Martin. Excited to be here today. And yeah, so
It's a pleasure. The point of this channel is to do exactly what we're doing now, and it's to highlight and promote indie musicians and especially new releases, so that the word gets out, as it were.
yeah. Well, we appreciate it. Thanks for what you're doing for indie
Pleasure. It's a
musicians
pleasure.
like us. Actually, just before I started this interview with you, I got done uploading all 13 tracks to DistroKid, and they're
Nice.
finishing up right now in the background here while we talk. And so this album is going to be called Our Love Story, and the
Yep.
band is my fiance and I. I'm American. I'm from near Philadelphia in the USA,
Yep.
and my fiance is from near Frankfurt, Germany. And about 2.5 years ago, I actually started recording music during the pandemic. I'd always kind of been like a hobbyist
You,
guitarist,
me,
and
and everyone. It seems that there's so many stories. If it did one positive thing, is it brought a lot more new music into the world.
I totally agree. I know so many other musicians who've told me the same thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was recording some songs, and the ironic part is I actually recorded a blues song, and it was
Hmm.
called Numbers in Color, and was all
Yeah.
about how the year 2020 sucked, which I don't think was too out there of a claim at that point. It was a
No.
pretty rough year. Um,
Definitely.
So I sent it to a friend of mine who I'd met through SoundCloud, never met the guy in person. And he said,
Hmm.
"Hey, really cool song, but I think you
Yeah.
need some female vocals in there." And I said, "All right, all right." And so I'm actually in my real life, not in my musician life, I'm a German teacher. And
Okay.
and so I was in a German speaking Twitter group, just with some people I met through Twitter. And I was like, well, yeah, let me check in this Twitter group, see if I can find a female vocalist that might work. And her stage name is Kiroyel, and I found some of her songs and heard her voice. It was like, yeah, this girl can sing. So, and then I went on her Instagram and saw her pictures, and I was like, ooh, okay, yeah, she's the one I gotta ask. That's when I knew right away. So,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so I asked her, and 2.5 years later, here we are, and she'll be moving to the United States soon, and we'll be getting married, and we're releasing this album all about kind of like the trials and tribulations we've gone through to get to this point, the difficulty of waiting and trying to create music from other sides of an ocean through FaceTime and sending tracks back and forth. And so we really just wanted to create an album that's kind of like as diverse and unique as our story. So no two songs are really going to sound the same. We
Yeah.
have some funk songs, we have a reggae song, we have acoustic songs, we have a blues song, we do a jazz song, we do a classical song, and we kind of just wanted to mix every genre in there that's kind of influenced us to become the musicians that we've become at this point.
Wow, what a great story. That's so fun. You know, it's amazing, it's sort of the cliche that music brings people together. But to actually see it in action like that is just it's unbelievable. But you keep
It,
hearing stories like this. Everyone
yep.
has a similar story. And I know with myself, I started also was COVID related. The first song I released was also a COVID song called "These Four Walls," which is
Yep.
exactly
Yep.
just about that feeling of being basically in prison. But yeah, no, it's fantastic. So wide range of stuff. That sounds like you've got a wide range of influences then too. So why don't we talk about a few of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, number one influence for me, without a doubt, is definitely the Beatles. Um, I'm lucky enough to share a birthday with John Lennon. You can see it. You can see it in our band name that I'm obviously a Beatles
Yes.
fan, and so is my fiance. She loves the Beatles as well. Um, but outside of that, I mean, I just like anything that really you can feel the passion behind the music. I had
Right.
a metal phase,
Hmm.
psychedelic phase. I mean, some of my other favorite bands are Tool, the Mars Volta, Pink Floyd, anything with a
Yep.
really psychedelic touch where you can really hear the complexity of the music and also kind of the passion that went into creating the songs as well.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and I would say all of our songs are diverse. but we definitely always try and have a little bit of that psychedelic touch in almost every one of our songs. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
no,
like,
definitely from the tracks that you've released so far that I've heard, there's definitely a very strong sort of psychedelic feel to them. I think in your guitar playing, and it's really it's well complemented with the strong female vocals too.
I
You know,
appreciate that.
no, it's interesting. So no, that's fantastic. Let me ask you, in terms of psychedelic, one of the most interesting bands that I found, that a lot of people don't really twig on to was the original Funkadelic.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, and especially some of the early records, and I mean that whole Funkadelic P Funk, Parliament Funk thing is just unbelievable. And
Yep.
the two faces of it, like the Parliament, which was much more R&B funk, and then it's like black psychedelia, right, mixed with funk records. And when you hear some of the stories when they're in the studio, and the craziness that they got up to, just and I don't think they get enough. I don't think the amount of influence that they've had on music gets enough credit.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think, unfortunately, I think that's often the case with a lot of bands who are really groundbreaking. It's sometimes like the second or third band after them
Yeah,
almost that gets a lot of credit for being the highly influential band. But if you ask those bands, they might name P Funk or something like that. That it's like, oh yeah, they really had played a big role in the sound and how we developed after that. So,
yeah,
and yeah,
yeah.
from
But
what I've
sorry.
heard, being a fly on the wall in that studio would have been a great time back in the day when they were
Yes.
recording all those things, right?
with George Clinton and the cast of thousands.
Yep.
It's like one of those. The only other band that I think was as chaotic, if not more chaotic, was, what was it called? The one that Lemmy was in. The British
Uh,
band.
Motorhead.
No. The band he was in before Motorhead.
Oh, okay.
He
I'm
was
not
in
sure.
this crazy collective. What were they called? Something Wing, Silver Wing. No,
Oh,
that
I'm
was
not
the
even
song.
familiar with them then. I don't
Oh
think.
no, no, yeah, I should almost get my other screen up and do some Google. It'll come to me. But just this crazy collective, like
Okay.
one of these bands that was a jam band,
Hmm.
and they were somehow sort of between rock but they had a real DIY sort of punk um, ethos to them.
Yeah.
So they had a large following that weren't necessarily into their music, but they were into that thing that they did.
Right.
So it's very much like like a British, almost like a British version of um, that the San Francisco band, the Grateful Dead.
Grateful Dead. Yeah. Yeah.
But where
Yeah.
the
Okay.
Grateful Dead are much more sort of folk and alt country rock, and
Yeah.
like that whole sort of San Francisco sound, these guys were more just on a completely other dimension. And they had one big hit, and it was Lemmy that sang it.
Okay.
And they were all like into psychedelics, right? And they'd get stoned out of their gourd on psychedelics and do these 4-hour, 5-hour long shows.
Right.
And they had problems with Lemmy because, well, he was still a bassist, right? But he was into amphetamines. So he wasn't a good mix, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
A
like,
little bit.
the crankheads just don't get along well with the and so finally I think they kicked him out of the band, or he left the band or whatever, and he said, at the next band I'm going to find guys who are like me. And then he founded Motorhead, and the rest
Yep.
is history, as it were.
Okay. Interesting. So see, you're teaching me something already in
Oh
this
no,
interview that I wasn't
I'm
aware
a
of.
magpie. I'm just constantly collecting these stories and listening to music. I love the lore of it, and especially what I found it's interesting is I had the opportunity. What was it? I can't remember the musician, and there were like multiple interviews where he was telling the same story and contradicting himself. So you could tell,
Yeah.
he told the story so many times and with so many variations that I think
Yep.
he ended up convincing himself of things that hadn't happened.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
it's so funny to hear it, but also so believable, because I know doing this, like I'm sure it's like you're the old the grandfather that keeps telling the same stories over and over again because things just keep coming up.
Yeah.
Where it sort of it clicks in your mind. It's like, oh yeah, like so Beatles.
Yeah.
So what's your top album?
That's really tough.
Well,
You
of
might
course
have
it
to.
is. That's why I'm putting you on the spot. Quick,
If
what would you say if you had one choice? You could only choose one. Which would it be?
If I had one choice, I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna go White Album.
Okay, well, fair. Well, that's almost unfair though, because that's
I know,
almost
because it's
two
too many
albums.
songs. But if I had to pick just one disc that wasn't a 2-disc album, then I would probably go Sgt. Pepper's.
Okay, well, fair. Well, that's their psychedelic heart, right?
Yep. And just
whereas myself, I would say that my big choice would be between Revolver and Rubber Soul.
Yep.
Although I think Sgt. Pepper's may be the bigger artistic achievement. If I'm going to sit and listen to the songs, the songs on those two records are just unbelievable.
Oh, I totally agree.
Like pop records, and you hear the beginnings of all the psychedelic, and I think it was right around that when they met Bob Dylan, right?
Yeah. So it was about 1966, I believe, that they met Bob Dylan, and
they started writing more serious songs. And I think it's also George got to write a few.
Yep.
And the world discovered, oh, they've got another good songwriter.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah. I mean, some of my favorite Beatles songs are George songs. I mean, some of my tops are "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," and "I Me Mine," and all.
Listen,
of those
what
songs
I can't understand is at that point how I guess it's because Brian Epstein was already gone or whatever, but how they didn't say, well, wait a second. I know Lennon and McCartney is great, but why don't we get the two of them sing, songwriting with him as well?
Yeah.
They don't have to be all three together.
Yeah.
But you could have Lennon, Harrison, or Harrison, McCartney too, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
Because that would have been interesting. You realize just how good he was. And, he didn't have someone to compliment, right? He was doing it all on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And also under the shadow of that songwriting duo, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. No pressure to live up to their songwriting ability or anything when you're in the same band and trying to write your own songs as well.
Yeah, but I agree. Some of his songs, it's like Taxman is just unbelievable.
Yep.
It's just like such an unbelievable song. It defines the 1960s, and his guitar lines. He was a master of the hook, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's totally underrated as a musician in general, in my opinion.
But I think he would also be the first one to say he was never a great, like he wasn't the soloist. He wasn't like this hot guitar player. He just, he just had a sound, and he had a lick, he could define a song, and he was a great lead guitarist for a band like the Beatles.
Yeah.
Because they would not have done well with a lead guitarist who'd want to solo all the time or something like that.
Yeah, Clapton wouldn't have worked out as well in the band.
No, it's in the same way you look at the Rolling Stones with Keith, Keith Richards, and you're wondering, it's like, did he even really play guitar all that well? But then it's like, and then you hear it's like, oh, but what? It's just like, and what he brings like as a rhythm guitarist is just, I don't know. It's he just has this thing, but a lot of the great ones have this thing,
Sometimes it just works, and it's hard to explain exactly why it works. And I think that's, Keith Richards is the perfect example of that. Like, nobody really sounds like him, but his sound isn't that complicated, but it's still often imitated, but never exactly mimicked or copied, because he's got his own thing going on.
Yeah, but I also think with him, what it was is a little bit like Dylan, in that they were both like, they had both had an enormous encyclopedic knowledge of music.
Yes.
And Keith Richards was the one. Do you know the story of how the two of them met?
Keith Richards and Mick Jagger? No, go ahead.
Well, they were living in sort of the same part of London, and I think they met originally on a bus, because I think Mick Jagger had, like, it was like the 60s, so they're carrying around the records.
Right.
And it's sort of like signaling, you know what I mean? And like, obviously the big one is in front, so people in the know could actually see it type
right,
thing.
Right.
It was before satchels or, any of that kind of thing. And one or the other had a record that the other one really wanted to hear. And that was at that time in England where, like, this stuff was coming in from sailors, right?
Yeah.
You could not go to a record store and buy, buy most of these records. And one, I don't know who it was, had some connection, or there was an uncle who was a merchant marine, like
Hmm.
crazy stuff, and would always bring back stuff. And they got totally both they found out they were both into the blues,
Yep.
and that's how it started.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a
Yeah.
really interesting story. So it's almost like I'm showing off my coolest record here in the front while I'm walking
Well,
around.
that's what
Almost.
was done.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how he was like signaling.
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean? And
Just like
anyone
wearing
in the
like a
know
gold
would
chain
know, and anyone
nowadays.
else would have no idea what it was, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you go to concerts nowadays and it's like people wear the most obscure band t-shirt that they can think of to wear to the concert, almost to show like, yeah, I know this band. Do you guys know this band?
Exactly. The
Yeah,
same vibe,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
down to
yeah.
the last iota of it.
Yeah, cool. That's a great story. I'll definitely
Yeah.
remember that one and be able to spread it to others now too.
So what other influences? I'll put you on the spot. Best Pink Floyd album.
Ooh, I'm gonna go with the one I've been listening to most lately. So I think I might have changed my opinion. I'm gonna go with Surprise Animals.
You're the second person who's answered that. Isn't that
Yeah,
funny? I'm gonna have to give it another listen because I myself, it's really Wish You Were Here for
and I
me.
can't argue with that. I mean, it's fantastic.
No, I listen. I think Dark Side is fantastic, but if I had to choose, I like the vibe of Wish You Were Here more.
Sure.
You know, there's certain parts of it that are just more, I don't know, modern almost. Although it makes sense. It's
I
like you
agree.
had one album is very much rooted in the 60s in a sense, where the other is, it's getting more mechanistic. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? The sound
yeah.
changes. And by the time you get to Animals, yeah, it's definitely. Now I'm going to have to listen to it again. I never got into it.
I
But it's
just
funny.
think
You're the second person who said that to me
the
when I've asked
songwriting
that
is like
question.
incredible in that album, and I think the story behind it, how like they were kind of catching flack, like being a prog band, that they didn't have really too much meaning in a lot of their lyrics, and then they come
Yeah.
up with this whole idea to mimic Animal Farm and make commentaries on society for the first time, and I just think the way they did it with the lyrics in those songs, I think that to me, that's what might set that album a little bit more apart than the other
Mhm.
ones lyrically. And I'm someone who really gets into the lyrics big
Okay.
time, and when I can feel that meaning in it as well, I
Yeah.
think that's what kind of puts it over the top for me. And anyone who can write a coherent 17-minute song and just fit it all together, it's like, oh my gosh, how do they do that? So I'm just kind of blown away by it.
With lots of work,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
with lots of work. It's like
Yep.
it's like I find the more I do, the more ability I have to sustain and extend a song.
Yep.
Because when I started out, I couldn't get anything over. If I got 3 minutes, it felt like a major achievement.
Yep, yep. I hear you. I hear you. My
Um,
first one was like 3.5. My next
yeah,
couple
well,
were
yeah,
all
yeah.
around
Well,
that too.
but you play guitar, so you could throw in a solo or something, right?
Right,
To,
right, right,
to
right.
stretch things out.
Yep,
But yeah, no, it's fascinating. I find that fascinating now. Whereas now I've got songs, and sometimes they'll stretch in 4.5 minutes, five. I still prefer pop. I'm not doing opuses,
sure.
but I could totally see doing like a 3 or 4 part song. Almost like a prog rock type thing.
Yeah,
With different parts and that. And I think that might be fun. You know.
yeah. And I think it's just like for me, it helps to kind of like tell the whole story we want to and kind of change the vibe. And since we're trying to tell a story through our music in this album, I think that's why like our longest song in the album is just over 7 minutes long. It's 7:03, I think. And it's like a classical song. And my
Yeah.
fiance even does some opera singing in the
Oh wow.
song and kind of ends with like, I don't know, almost like a Black Sabbath style, like tear it down solo and everything.
Hmm.
So it's got a couple different movements in there that sound quite different from each other.
Nice. So, before you got into the sort of Spotify sort of streaming game, were you in any bands before that, or just completely,
I was
basement hero?
Yeah, I was mostly just like I would jam with some of my friends' bands, and I kind
Mhm.
of was always jealous that I never was in a band, but I was always really just a hobbyist guitarist. And then for whatever reason, one day I kind of like something kind of clicked in my head. I was like, I just don't want to do this as a hobby anymore. And for whatever reason, it was before the pandemic. I bought all my recording equipment and I had it sitting in the studio. I bought it during the school year, so I was too busy to really set it up. And then the pandemic came and I was like, thank God I bought all this stuff and I have this here. And I had a MIDI keyboard. And so I started watching YouTube videos on how to play piano and bought a bass and started figuring out how to play bass and bought some bongos and some drums and just kind of like, I never had so much time in my life to try and teach myself new things. And I figured out,
Yeah.
let's make the best out of it as we can. So no, this is my first band I've ever been in is this band.
Oh, fun. Well, I mean, hey, listen, that's great. And it's, like I said, it's the positive side of the lockdowns.
Yeah.
You know, those of us that sort of took it in hand. For me, it's what kept me sane.
Totally.
I think more than anything else, it kept me going and it kept me sane. And, you know, and then I found out, well, I really quite like this. Although I had started before then, you know, and I'd done various projects of various, you know, with various degrees of success. But the decision to say, all right, I'm going to go out, I'm going to release it. And then also the decision, I'm going to release it under my real name rather than a band name. That was all definitely COVID driven, you know?
Yeah.
So I
I was
thought
way.
if I don't do something like this, I'm just going to go crazy.
Yeah, and I honestly like not being able to see people. And then initially I started by just like uploading stuff onto SoundCloud.
Yeah.
And that I think is a great way to start because that way you can like comment directly on the tracks, you can message each other, and that kind of almost gave me like some sort of socialization that I was missing when I wasn't able to go see anybody because it was just me and my two cats here for the most part, and they're fine and all, but you know they don't really have a lot to say most of the time. So yeah, I thought that definitely provided me with some solace and kind of made me feel a little bit more like a regular human, right? And then people started commenting nicely, so it kind of gave me a little confidence. I'm like, yeah, what the heck? Why don't we do more? And so I was just like you. I released 20 singles, I think, under just my name, Tyler Cressman, before I started this band.
Wow. Well, good. That's excellent. That's excellent. So, what do you use as your digital audio workstation, your DAW?
My DAW, I have a Mac, so I use Logic.
Okay.
And I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with it. There's some things in terms of like some of the plugins that you can't get to load in there and things like that. That's not ideal. But also being a teacher, I was able to get an incredible discount on it. So it was almost like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then once maybe I get further down the road, I'd be something to upgrade. But it's really, I know it so well now. And I think I can almost get a pretty solid professional sound out of it. And being only just, you know, just really getting started in the mixing and the mastering kind of phases of it all.
Yeah. Well, that's the voodoo, you know. The mastering is the voodoo. The mixing I'm getting better at, but mastering, man.
I agree.
There's nothing.
I agree.
There's nothing more frustrating.
Yep. I can't get down all the phase cancellations and all that kind of stuff where it's like, and then I'll have someone else take a stab at it. And it's like, God, your version sounds 10 times clearer than mine. How the heck are you doing that? So,
yeah, well, I mean, that's the problem, I mean, especially if your music has any degree of dynamics to it.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
You know, where it goes from very quiet to quite loud and stuff. I think that's where the big problems lie.
Yep.
And I think we both share a certain need to make the music a little dramatic at times.
No doubt. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. All of my favorite bands and influences have some kind of dramatic element to their music, and that's what draws me into the music: the drama, the energy, the feeling behind it. There's plenty of guys that are technically great musicians, but when you don't exactly have a lot of feeling to the music, then I can appreciate it, but it's not something that I'll be totally drawn to.
Yeah. And so have you been into music your whole life since you were a kid, or?
Absolutely. So I'm a product of two hippie parents, definitely. My dad graduated high school in 1966, so he was like right in the middle of the hippie era, and both of them played a huge influence on me in terms of getting me into music. And I was already coming up with band names for my future band when I was like 5 or 6 years old. There's like home movies of me talking about that kind of stuff. And by the
Oh,
time
that's
I was
fun.
13 or 14, I started playing guitar. And like I said, it
Yeah,
was mostly just a hobbyist thing because I enjoyed it and enjoyed going to shows and
yeah, yeah,
listening to
yeah, yeah,
music.
yeah.
And then
So who was your guitar hero when you first bought your guitar? Who did you want to
uh,
sound like?
yeah, I'm sure everyone says this, but it was definitely Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, well, it's the period, and
Yeah.
and he's one of the greatest of all time, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I, my,
there's very few that will ever match him.
Nah, and just his style and just like he's the one that yeah, technically he's an incredible guitarist. Like I'm not no doubt about that, but I think he put so much raw emotion into his playing that you can feel maybe perhaps more, in my opinion, perhaps more than any other guitarist. And being like an 8-year-old watching the Woodstock documentary on VHS and watching it like
Yeah,
10 times in a row, watching Hendrix set and everything. It was just I can still remember
yeah,
sitting there as a little kid watching that and it just blew
yeah.
me
But
away.
you know what as well though. I think that it never would have happened without the experience.
Oh, definitely
I mean
not.
that rhythm section, or well, whatever you want to call it, you know, his accomplices.
Yep.
Um, I don't think he would have had the free, like those guys were like telepathic
Yep.
when they were playing together. It's just
Yep.
unbelievable. And that's another case where they should get more credit because, Hendrix was around for a long time. He was technically great. He was, everything that you said, but that band just put them into another stratosphere,
Oh, no doubt. I totally agree. And he was
you know.
such a character and he was doing all of his antics on the stage. It's almost like everyone kind of forgot who was behind him. But
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that he could turn on a dime and they were right there with him,
yep.
right? And
Yep.
especially in the drumming, it's just like it wasn't even rhythmic at times,
Nope.
and it did not matter
Nope.
because but it was rhythmic. It was 1/27th
Yep.
or whatever that they were doing, and that hit back on it. And it's like, how are they doing this? This is insane.
Yep.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just how he knew, like, okay, all the right snare hits and all that kind of stuff where it's like, when I do some of my own music, I would never even think to have snare hits in the way that he's doing it or that would
Oh,
ever
the
fit
great
with it.
drummers are just, Ginger Baker is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the drummers that can play hooks on the drums. Those are the
Yeah.
great ones, right?
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, that they're playing hooks on the drums. I like
Yeah.
that. Definitely
Well,
well
like the
said.
most famous one of that is that the Wrecking Crew player, Hal Blaine.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a guy who played on all the 60s American hits.
Yep.
All the Beach Boys, all the, all of it. And all
Interesting.
those all of these like drum sort of things that you remember are all him.
Interesting. Okay.
Or a lot of them are, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
where you think of a drum part as being like integral to like a hit record,
Yeah.
it's usually him.
Interesting. Okay. All
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. But that whole band, the Wrecking Crew, were just crazy.
Right, right,
They were
right.
so good. Glenn Campbell, who was the other guitarist? Oh, I can't even remember. There's another an Italian name. It slips my mind, but it's so fun. Tommaso. I think his last name was Tommaso. I can't remember
Oh,
his
okay.
first name.
I'm not familiar with him.
No, but you've heard him. Let's say you've heard
Right,
a
right,
lot
right.
of him. And I remember I was watching, it's probably the Wrecking Crew or some footage from that documentary that they did, and they had one guy talking, or maybe it was even Glenn Campbell telling the story of him, because they all played behind baffles, right? They're all in one big studio. This is like
Mhm.
pre-multi-tracking and overdubbing and all that. They're all playing it live, and he's behind a baffle, and the producer's there, and he said, "Oh, I don't know. Can you? How about a mandolin?" And he'd look down and he'd go and pick something up and he'd start playing, and you couldn't see what he's playing, right?
Right.
And it's like sounded just like a mandolin. I don't know, but how about this? How about this kind of this? And Glenn Campbell was there, he's watching him, and he said, I almost lost my mind. All he was doing was playing the guitar, right? But he could make that guitar sound like any stringed instrument he wanted
Right.
to, right? With ease, you know what I mean? Or the other thing is, I think it was another story of him. And for whatever reason, it was when they're getting charts. So they give the musician the chart, the whoever the producer was, and he put it up backwards, or it was transcribed backwards or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he plays it, right? It sounds crazy because, well, it's being played backwards. And the guy said, what? You know, what's going on? And it's like, well, that's the way you played it. And he turned it over and he just played it the other way. You know, unbelievable.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. That's the kind of
The
musicianship.
musicianship is just, yeah, well, you have to appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, someone who can do that kind of stuff, and the people who can sight read like that.
Yeah.
Which I don't think I'll ever do. I gave up on the piano because of that. It's just like, it, you know, I could never really sight read and get both the hands coordinated. And it's like, oh God.
Yep. Yeah, I can't even read music, to be perfectly honest. I do it
Yeah.
all through tabs, and I mean, I know like what the scales are and what the notes are in the scale and have
Yeah.
that all memorized, but I couldn't tell you why it's a Dorian scale or
Oh
anything
no,
like that.
that's well beyond me too.
Yeah.
If it sounds okay, it's fine. If it doesn't, you know.
Yep.
And then once
same
in a
with the
while, someone will say,
piano.
"Well, why did you play it like this? Rather, this would have made much." I was like, "I have no idea. It just sounded good."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
sounded good enough. I knew it wasn't out of tune.
Yep.
You know, and that all the notes were somehow, you know, complementary to one another.
Yep.
Do I know what I'm
Exactly.
doing? No idea. That's half the fun of it.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah. It's almost like you never know what you're going to come up with because you really don't have an exact idea of what you're doing, and you're just kind of feeling it and hope it turns out all right in the end. And sometimes it turns
Exactly.
out great, and other times it's like, yeah, I think I got
Yeah.
to
Other
record
times you
that
don't
again.
release it.
Yep, exactly. I have plenty just sitting in my DAW here that are saved that I don't think are going to see the light of day anytime soon. So
Yeah. Although, listen, I would say, you know, give it 6 months and one night go and start listening through it, and you'd surprise yourself.
yeah,
Because there's things that I didn't release, and you know, I played them recently again. It's like, why did I release that? What did I, you know what I mean? Because I think
yeah,
sometimes you get, at least for me, you get so obsessed about something, right? Or one little thing, you find it so wrong that you don't like the whole song because of that, and then you listen to it 2 months later and you don't even notice it.
right. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just like you somehow, it was like you were transferring from something else onto the song, or I don't know what, you know. But yeah, so I listened to it again. You might surprise yourself, and it's a gold mine. I mean, I love going back and reusing stuff. If I like it, even if it didn't work out, there's usually one part, a hook, or you know,
Yeah.
some line that you like, and you know,
Yep. I have like
recycling is good.
I have like 15 bass lines recorded where it's just like, yeah, one time these are gonna work for whatever song I'm gonna do. And sometimes I just go back and listen to those. And actually, two of them in this upcoming album were ones where I went back, was like, all right, that could work for this song. That sounds a little jazzy, or that sounds a little funky. And then I end up building like a whole song just based around that, what I had already
Yeah.
when I was just messing around and hit the record button to see what would come out.
Yeah, and listen, sometimes that's where the gold lies, right?
Yeah.
I've done that a lot. There's because I can't play. You know, I've done a fair amount of improvisation where, you know, the lead line or whatever, you know, you're messing around for 3-4 minutes and you save 20 seconds.
Right.
It's like that little 20 seconds of gold.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the you know, the seed that becomes a song.
Yeah. Yep.
At least that's my process.
No, and I get you. Sometimes
Or
I don't even
one of them. I mean, I've
I would
got
say
2 or 3.
80% of my songs, I would say, were just all started with me either noodling around on the piano, the bass, or the guitar. And I'm noodling around, noodling. All of a sudden, it's like, you know what? That sounds pretty cool. Maybe only once or twice did I ever sit down and say, I'm going to write a song about this and actually be successful with it. Normally, it doesn't work that way.
No, they tend to be the worst songs.
Yeah.
It's like the one I remember the best that was just like, you know, it's just like, I'm going to try to stay away from like overt political songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it was Yes, Save the Whales or whatever. I don't even remember that. And it was just
yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
Awful. Like embarrassing.
Yeah,
right?
it's like so canned. It's like,
Well, yeah, it's like someone had a great idea and they sat down and they, you know, at that point they had the studio, they had the tech, you know, they had everything to do it in a day or a day or so.
Yeah.
But it's just like they should have gone home. They should have gone to the bar that day.
Yeah.
It would have been more productive than this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they could have drowned something else instead of saving the whales that day. So yeah,
Exactly.
That's funny that you mentioned them too. I actually just bought Yes tickets yesterday. I'm gonna go see him again. So I've seen him 3 or 4 times before, and I know there's not many of them left, but I
Yeah.
still enjoy watching Steve Howe live. He's incredible.
Well, Steve Howe is, yeah. I mean, but they had some great members, you know.
Oh, no
And
doubt.
are they? Is there any theme to it, or is it just like a greatest hits at the moment?
It's their 50th anniversary of
Okay,
their whichever tour, whatever the name of the tour was for the album that Roundabout is on. So it's the 50th anniversary of that tour. So they were kind
okay.
of redoing that. I looked up some of the set lists, and it's a lot of the songs from that era that they're going to
Well,
be
that's
kind of
nice. Well,
featuring.
that's their best era.
Oh, I agree. Yeah,
I think they
absolutely.
sort of went off the reservation after that with some of the releases after that just got way too free jazzy for me.
Yeah.
You
Or
know.
even into the 80s when
Oh well,
I,
into the Save the Whale period.
yeah, yeah,
You know?
those like 80s synthesizers. Like I'm
Yeah.
not a if I had to pick one decade I could do without, it'd probably for the most part be the 80s. Because I
Yeah,
was
but
big
what
in
matters who is doing it, right?
right.
Because
Just
like all the actual sort of new wave post punk synthesizer stuff was good,
yeah,
but yeah, anyone else, any of the sort of what were then being considered dinosaur bands were not. They did not have a happy understanding or success with the sort of synthesizer or like electronics.
yeah,
But the
yeah.
problem was they were just trying to, sort of weld it on to what they were already doing, right?
Yeah, it was kind of their like attempt to kind of stay relevant with what the new sound was and kind of build that in there as well. But yeah, it just didn't
Yeah,
work because that wasn't what their sound was to begin with.
exactly. Although it's interesting, it's like when John Anderson went and worked with Vangelis, it worked,
Hmm.
you know, because Vangelis, he knew what he was doing around synthesizers, right? He
Right,
had a better idea of what was good, what worked and what didn't work,
right.
and that record is actually pretty good, the John and Vangelis. Um, yeah, no, it's prog rock. Oh my god, I was really into it before the big. It's interesting. It was sort of that was the time when I was listening to a lot of music, and I grew up in Montreal,
Oh, okay.
and Montreal was like a hotbed for progressive rock music, right?
Interesting. Okay.
Like a real, all the bands went there because there was a big audience for it, much bigger, and they broke earlier, and they're bands that even most American fans wouldn't know about unless you really got into it, that were
Right.
big in Quebec at the time for whatever reason. It's sort of like Italy too. Italy, for whatever reason, has a big sort of prog rock contingent.
Yeah, Italy is just they love any kind of music there.
Yeah,
It's so
but
I feel like
there's certain sort of quirky things that
yeah,
the Italians like really get into, or the
yeah.
Japanese are the same way, right? There's
Also
they're
true. Yeah.
fanatical about certain genres that didn't really catch on or never went that mainstream. That they
Yeah.
are just like they're major stars, right?
Yeah.
Though someone will pay $1 million for a commercial with them in it, type thing, and it's like,
Right.
okay, it's because they're that famous, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just trying to think where would you come down. It's interesting, just in prog rock. um I was a big fan of Genesis, the
Okay.
early stuff. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and I have to say, if I was to choose between Yes and King Crimson, I'd probably fall down on the King Crimson side,
Oh, me too.
mostly because I'm such a fan of Robert Fripp,
Yep. Yep.
and
I
just
would
how
too.
crazy good a guitarist he was.
Yeah, he just unbelievable, and I think so trend-setting. And if I had to pick a second favorite band, my second favorite band is probably Tool,
Okay.
and they cite King Crimson as being one of their biggest musical influences, and you can really hear it in a lot of their songs, a lot of their offbeat kind of timing. And I've seen King Crimson twice, and he's still with them, and they're just ridiculous live. I saw him in
Did
like
you
a
did you see the tour when they had all three drummers?
It's exactly the one I was just going to mention. I saw them in a
That,
symphony
I'm
hall.
really jealous. I've only seen some video of that, like
Uh,
YouTube of some of the songs. I think it was at Starless or something, and it's just like,
yep,
oh my god.
yep. Oh, it was. That's in my top 3 or 4 shows that I have ever seen, and it was a small symphony hall. I think it maybe sat like no more than 1,500, 2,000
Wow.
people, and I was maybe like 15, 20 rows back, kind of
Yeah.
center left, and I just remember sitting there with my eyes like wide open the whole time, like, oh my god, I've never seen a concert like this before. It was incredible.
Yeah, the sound was just unbelievable that they had. You think it's not going to work with three drummers, but
Yeah.
they complemented one another so much.
Yep.
And then when they wanted to really have like a big sound, oh my God.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. At first, I was like, "Well, they got 3 different drum kits set up. He's gonna play all 3 of them when they come out." I had no idea there were gonna be 3 drummers coming out onto the stage, and they all come out.
Yeah.
I'm like, "What
Three
is
pretty
going
good
on here?"
drummers too.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, it's like,
yeah.
you know, they're all ones I'd have in my band.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Considering I don't have a drummer, I'd be just fine with having any of those in my band as well.
yeah. No, but yeah, it's no, that's really fun. I'm very jealous of you.
Yeah.
That is one concert I would have loved to have gone to.
Yeah, that was just like, and it was totally by chance. My dad was like, "Hey, King Crimson's coming around. Let's get tickets." I was like, "All right, cool." Took one of my buddies with, and we just sat there like blown away for 2.5 hours while they
Had you been
played for us.
familiar with their material before, or
Oh yeah, definitely. No,
okay?
I was already a fan of them because, like I said, I was like one time I was watching an interview with Tool, and they said, "Oh yeah, King Crimson, one of our biggest influences," and that was before I even knew them. So then I went back and listened to King Crimson. I was like, "Oh yeah, definitely, I can see why they're into this," and I loved it. And so yeah, I've been a fan for years. And this is probably like 5 or 6 years ago now. I would say was that King Crimson show that I saw them with the 3 drummers.
Yeah, no, it's you know, I'm still searching. I'd love to find a guitarist that had a credible sort of Robert Fripp sound.
Oh yeah,
It's one of my biggest dreams,
yeah.
actually.
And he's
You
got
know,
such a unique sound. I think that's just like it's going to be really hard to
well,
find
I mean
someone
that's it,
like that.
but someone who just like gets the same vibe as much as anything
Yeah.
else. Because I think it's with him. I mean, he's so disciplined
Yep.
and fanatical in a way with the way he plays and this precision and you know whatever. But it's also he's a craftsman of a sound.
Yep.
And you listen to one like the first note, you know who it is.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
he's just like one of those
Absolutely.
players, you know exactly who it is, and then he blows your mind, you
Yep.
know, if he wants to. Well,
Oh,
it's like the thing on Heroes, right? The story of that when they, you know, they were having trouble. Bowie was in the studio with his longtime sort of musical partner Tony Visconti, and you know they're wondering, you know, they need something, and I think it was Brian Eno was also sort of contributing on the record, suggested, you know, they wanted a guitar sound, and you know said call up Robert Fripp. So they called him up, and he was like, it was one of the periods when he wasn't playing, you know, when he'd sort of gone and become a hermit.
yeah.
And you know they called him up, and you know got him on the next plane, and literally he was unpacked his guitar, plugged it in, and did the guitar on Heroes. 2 takes, both takes, right? And what they
Yep.
did, they played both at the same time.
Yep.
You know, done. That was it. You know,
Yeah.
packs up the guitar, goes home. Well, actually, he did a few other songs, but you know what I mean.
Right.
But he
Yep.
just, you know, but I think that's the key to collaboration. Sometimes is if you find the right person, you just let them go. You know, because
Yeah.
otherwise, why would you have chosen them to collaborate with?
Yep. Yep. Totally. Yep. Yep. If you want to collaborate, you got to be willing to accept what they're bringing to the table, and there's a reason why you picked them. So yeah,
Well,
I
you picked
totally
them
agree
because
with
you
you.
knew what they're going to bring to the table, right? And
Exactly.
if they do their best, then it's going to work perfectly.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
it's going
Yep.
to put things in a completely different direction, because I've had that as well, and it's been, wow, you heard that? That is cool. I never would have
Hmm.
thought of that. You know, I never would have thought of putting that kind of thing. But you know what? That's brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, let's keep it. You know,
Yep. Yep. It works. Yep. Definitely. And I
that's
think
good.
that's the fun of collabing too, because you don't know you got other ideas coming to the table with got people like us who are mostly DIY, and you know what I mean. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest from the trees when you're the only one bringing the ideas in terms of writing the music and that kind of stuff too. So yeah, I totally agree.
Good.
We did one EP that was kind of like a hard progressive rock EP, and it was bassist from Canada, a guitarist from California. My fiance sings on it, and then I do some of the guitar and some of the key works in there too. And I also sing on it, and it's totally different than any of the stuff that we're releasing now. It has a very, very hard prog rock, cyberpunk almost kind of feel to it.
Oh, well, hey, that's part of the fun too, right?
Yeah,
Not being, you know, I think it'd be so boring if you were, you know, completely just in one little genre
yeah,
and just stayed there all the time. and or it's like the curse of having a hit,
Yep.
like being a one-hit wonder,
Yep.
where your whole family's livelihood is based on your ability to play the same song that you hate, you know,
Yep.
night after night after night after night.
Yep. And
It's
I've
sort of
heard
like
that from
purgatory for musicians, right?
many musicians too. The ones
Yeah,
that become their biggest hit are the songs that they hated the most when they wrote them, and then it's almost the
yeah,
irony of the fact that they have to keep playing it then afterwards too.
yeah. Well, I think sometimes they probably didn't hate it as much when they wrote it
Yeah.
as to after the 5,000th time that they played it, you
Hmm.
know. But on the other hand, you can't complain too much if you've had a hit that's given you a career, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I
You
don't
know,
think I'd be complaining too much, but I
no,
mean, I'm not there yet, so we'll see.
neither am I. Although I think as I've said a few times, if I had to choose, I'd prefer to be the J.J. Cale to Eric Clapton than even
Okay.
having. I'd prefer someone else have a big hit with my song.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I
That
don't
would be
know.
even better, and then I could sit in my Airstream trailer out in the desert and do my own thing, right?
Right, right, right. Living off the royalties and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then do your stuff, and well, I mean, if you're J.J. Cale, you've had Eric Clapton's had 2 number 1 hits or 3 number 1 hits with your songs, right?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. I mean, I'd be happy either way. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong. I wouldn't take it or leave it. But I think I kind of like, I mean, I'm a teacher, so I'm like on the stage every day in front of everybody. So it's almost like different kind of stage, of course, but it's
yeah, yeah,
almost
yeah.
like I kind of feel really comfortable doing that kind of thing. And,
Oh
but
no, no,
yeah.
listen, totally. I've been in a number of bands, and I was generally the lead singer,
Hmm.
so you're the center of attention, and
Sure.
and I totally got into it. You have to commit 100%, you know,
Yep.
to it, and it was a load of fun, and the adrenaline of playing live, there's nothing like it,
Yeah.
you know.
Gotta say, I'm very much looking forward to it. I played a couple small, like, acoustic settings and things like that, but the fact that my fiance still is overseas and
Yeah,
we've still yet to play live, even though we're releasing our full first album here, and it'll be an interesting experience considering I'm the instrumentalist in the band, so we got to figure out how we're gonna do all that, and
yeah.
so it'll be an
Well, I
interesting
mean, listen, you
experience.
can also just find a rhythm section, you know,
Yep,
for your live stuff.
yep.
Um, it's not going to hurt, as it were.
Oh, definitely not. That would be the preference. It's just I kind of
Yeah,
live in a smaller area. Like I live about an hour and a half from New York City or an hour and a half from Philly, but I live
yeah.
kind of like in the
You
countryside.
would be surprised in this day and age. There's probably people in your neighborhood that you don't even know about.
Yep.
you
Yep.
know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
so,
probably right. Others who started playing during the pandemic too, and
or
now
we're in bands and they're looking. It's always if there's a place where there's live music, there'll be musicians that know other musicians or are looking for musicians type thing,
Yep.
right?
Yep. 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 Absolutely
So
right.
it's not that. I mean, the biggest thing I found is as you get older, people have more busy lives,
Right.
so you don't have the time you had when you were younger to sort of commit to it.
Yeah, once they'll
So,
have
but
kids
find
and
listen, find a
families.
rhythm section in their early 20s.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
exactly. I'll just have to find them a couple years younger than me and then we'll be good to go.
exactly. But no, that's really funny. Oh God.
You
So
were mentioning
just
like concerts you missed out on, but what were some of your top concerts that you've been to? What would you say
Oh
if you had to
God.
list a couple
I,
of
I
them that
was
just
really lucky. I worked in a record store in the early '80s, and I got to go and see a lot of shows. I had access to a lot of free tickets,
yeah.
so I saw almost every interesting band. I mean, the only one I missed that I really I kick myself. I can't remember why I was working or whatever. Was the Clash
Oh,
when they
cool.
came over, but before they broke.
Right.
So that this was before London Calling. It
Right.
was after they'd done their first album, and I didn't see them, but I saw Simple Minds, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. I'm just any all of the REM. I saw REM for Murmur,
Mm,
which was quite a show. Just trying to think who else. Just anyone of that period.
yeah.
I saw New Order. They weren't very good live. The
Interesting.
Cure, who were unbelievable for their first record for a Forest.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a great show. And they're pretty psychedelic too, actually, or at least
Oh,
they were.
definitely.
The early stuff was really
Yeah.
like a forest was really pretty psychedelic. Um, yeah, a lot of sort of British stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Who else did I see? I'm just trying to think. Oh God, I would have to say the most impressive one, but that had to do more with the sound and just how groundbreaking the actual live sound was Kraftwerk.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw them for the Computer World Tour.
Yeah.
And with that, it was pretty crazy because they had spent the two years before they went on tour, basically working with engineers from Telefunken to put their studio on tour.
Interesting.
So what you heard, like the quality of the sound system, was groundbreaking. And I mean, I've seen a lot of shows at that point,
Sure.
you know, and that theirs was like it was just in a different dimension. Because if anything, what they'd achieved was a sound system of the quality of all the sort of uh, music clubs have now. Like, you know, the big clubs that you go into and they have these
Yeah.
incredible, insane sound systems.
Yeah.
They had that in like 1983, 84 before any of this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Before
And
there
it
were
was
these
just,
super clubs.
oh yeah, and this it was just unbelievable, and the whole thing was unbelievable, right? The stage was like the Starship Enterprise. No, seriously, it was like the bridge of the Enterprise, and there were all
Awesome.
these like all these sort of keyboards and self-made instruments because they made a lot of the instruments themselves.
Right.
And the two guys who did the rhythm stuff both were playing. They had these like sticks with that were connected to wires, and they were playing like these proto electronic drums that they developed themselves, but they were actually like they were trained classically trained percussionists, right?
Right.
So they knew how to keep a really they complex beats and all that kind of stuff, and precise and like really, and the whole thing was just so different to anything else out there, and had the sound that was just I left it blown away. And they basically had, well, the show was about 3 hours with an intermission, and they played, I think, everything that they'd recorded up until then. The whole catalog.
So you got your well, even if they were free tickets, you definitely got your money's worth.
That wasn't free
one.
tickets. I had to pay for that one, and I didn't mind.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, yeah, I can see that you still remember it like it was yesterday. Definitely.
Oh, because, well, it was mind blowing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yep.
It was just like one of those. It was almost as mind blowing as my first concert.
Yep. And who was your first?
I had a cousin who was really into music, and he knew someone at the Montreal Forum, which is well, I mean, you're near Philly, so be like the old Spectrum.
Yep.
And they got us up into the broadcast booth, right? So 50 feet over center ice, looking straight down on the stage. And it was the tour for A Night at the Opera, Queen headlining, and the backup band was Rush.
That's your first
for the 2112 tour.
Oh my gosh!
So Rush played 2112, right?
Yep.
And I became a Rush fan after that. It was just I'd never even heard of them. It was right before they broke big. They broke big on that tour.
Yeah.
And then it was Queen for A Night at the Opera.
Is that the show that they have on DVD that you can buy from Montreal? Is that show?
Probably 1976. I don't know.
I have that on DVD. I'm pretty sure.
Really, you can buy it?
If that's the same one, I'm almost positive it's from Montreal. I'm almost positive it's from Montreal. The one that
it was a great show. I mean, the whole thing. Like what a backup band, right? And that tells you just how good Queen was at that point. Not to blink an eye at having that band open up for them.
Yeah. At that point,
they could have blown anyone else away at the moment, right?
Yeah, just with
it was a really good show, and the sound was that was just. And I think I was like 13. It's just crazy.
Oh, that's a great
You
first
know,
show.
yeah, no, it was. I was blessed for my first concert.
Yeah, and those are two bands I've never seen, unfortunately, and obviously wouldn't. I mean, I saw Queen with Adam Lambert, but it's like,
Yeah, it's not the same.
no, no, no.
Yeah, but
So
see, I don't know if I'd trade it, but I'd definitely I'd love to see King Crimson. I'd love to see that tour you saw of King Crimson.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's one I'd kick myself. Although the tickets for that were a bit on the pricey side.
yeah. They weren't cheap, but I think it might have been like a birthday present or something for
Oh,
me.
okay,
So I
well
don't even.
then,
That's why I don't remember what the price was. I think because I don't think I had to pay for them, so it worked
yeah.
out
Well, a
for
lot of
me.
concerts have gotten very expensive.
Yeah,
You know.
yep, yep. Just to see anyone of like significance
Yeah.
nowadays. That's why it's like you got to see these bands before they get too big.
Yeah, well, and now at least now venues have started opening up
Yeah.
and stuff. Have you had a chance to see anything recently?
So I was actually just in Germany all summer. While I
Hmm.
had my summer off. So I was in a town called Koblenz,
Yeah.
and they have a really awesome fortress in the middle of the town on top of the hill. So there was like a world music festival going on there
Okay.
called Horizon. I'd never heard of any of the bands, but it's like really cool African bands, a couple like Ukrainian polka bands, and kind of just like everything you could imagine. So that was kind of like the first concert I got to go to since it opened back up, since everything
Yeah.
opened back up, and I've got some tickets to see Yes, obviously, and I'm gonna go see King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizards in a little bit too. It's kind of
Fun.
like they're like my heroes for bringing psychedelia back a little bit to the mainstream here.
No, it's not no great. No, it makes me think another great show I saw during that whole period was King Sunny Ade.
Oh, okay,
And that was quite a show
okay.
because he had, I don't know, a 14-piece band. I think it was something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Crazy.
Just a
Absolutely
couple
crazy
short
with
of
like,
having an orchestra back there with them.
well, no, but it was like it was African, right? So he had
Right,
like
right.
three or four talking drums
Yep.
and all kinds of percussion, and then the band, a drummer. I think they had horns and then background singers.
Yep.
So the sound was just, and that was crazy stuff.
Yep.
I mean, the West African music is pretty fascinating too.
Yeah, my favorite band from this Horizon festival was from Ghana. So they just
Yeah,
had such a cool sound and so many different influences going on in the
yeah,
music and such great beats. So we had a great
yeah.
time.
Well, it's also the guitar playing though. I find that's
Yeah,
interesting, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah, I agree.
you can really hear the strong influence on blues
Sure.
from the West African style of playing, right?
Yep. And I almost
It's
feel like it's like blues with less of the really extreme bends going on.
yeah,
It's a lot of
yeah.
more direct notes, maybe a little vibrato, but not a lot of like,
Hmm.
the Chuck Berry kind of bends or anything like that
No,
that
no,
he's
no, but
playing.
it's interesting because I think the style that actually influenced what then became the sort of Delta blues
Yeah,
has a direct link from the stringed instruments they were playing in West Africa that the
sure.
slaves
And
brought over.
yeah, it
You
makes
know,
perfect sense too.
and you really notice it. Like it's, I don't think it was the other way around, although it may
Mhm.
well have been too, because you never know. Music is, one thing's always influencing the next, right?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily directly linear.
Yeah, but it wouldn't surprise me at all that the influence, that the style of playing, which is quite different from, let's say, bluegrass and picking and that
Sure.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
That whole style did not come out of that and then got adapted, and with guitars and ended up in those early blues players, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah, yeah.
acoustic blues players. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. But so anyway, we're almost at an hour. So I'm going to ask you the last question I ask everyone,
All right.
and it's a pretty straightforward. What was the first music you bought with your own money? That's to say, from your allowance. Like, what was the first thing that excited you so much that you actually put down money to buy it?
Okay. It was two cassette tapes. I bought them at the same time. I still
Yep.
remember it. There's a little record shop. It's still around. I'm the town I'm from is called Kutztown. It's about 10,000 people, and half of those are
Okay.
college students. So there's a
Yep.
nice little record shop in town, and I went in and I bought Green Day's Dookie album. And I bought what even was the name of the Metallica album that came out there? It was like I can picture the album, like The Story Remains the Same, I think is on there, and I think Fuel might have been on there, but I forget even the name of the album. But I definitely remember those are my first 2 cassette tapes that I ever bought. And then right after that, I think I actually bought a Marilyn Manson album too.
So pop punk, basically heavy metal, very heavy metal at the
Yep.
time. That's when Metallica was the big thing, right?
Yep.
And then you went even deeper into things.
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. So I've had all my different phases. The hardcore metal phase, where all I listened to was like Between the Buried and Me and Fall of Troy and bands like that. And then I have where I'm listening to the Beatles and all that kind of stuff. So depends just on the day for me.
Yeah, well, and you can definitely hear that in your music. The different influences definitely come through.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, no, it's funny. You just made me think of. I love stories with used record stores.
Yeah.
Because when I was a teenager and a kid, I literally would go every weekend on Saturday morning. I would go and buy records. Right.
Yep.
I'd have my allowance or whatever from I think I had a paper route at one point and whatever. And I'd always go down. You'd always buy, and you'd have enough money to maybe buy one thing.
Right.
So you had to you listen to that then.
Yep.
You didn't have the choice of just listening to it once and throwing it aside. I mean, it meant a lot more.
Yep.
And one time it was so funny. I was down visiting relatives. And of course, I'm always looking around for record stores, right? And there's a little used store right around the corner from where I was staying. So I go in one morning, you know what I mean? And no one there but me. And it's a classic record store. And the owner had obviously just crawled in. He'd probably had a pretty crazy night before. And there's this young teenage boy really interested in music, right? And he looks at me and said, I got to go and get a coffee. So keep an eye on the store. And, when I get back, you can choose a record, right? So he goes off, and it's like 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday or something. There's no one coming into the store but me, right?
Right.
So he's gone for a bit, and I'm going through all the used records and taking a look. And so I finally decide and choose what I'm going to take. And it was great because it was I wish I still had the record, because it was the gatefold version of the first Roxy Music record.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was a good that was a good pick.
Oh man, I had no idea who it was. I was one of those when you buy the record based on the cover. Or I didn't buy it. I chose it on the basis of the cover, and it changed my life.
Yep.
Because that record that's another band completely. You were talking about Hendrix before, and just how groundbreaking, and ahead of its time were King Crimson too.
Mm-hmm.
And Roxy Music, that first record was also just completely, complete. When you put it into context, I think is the biggest thing, and realize it came out in 1971.
Okay. Yeah.
Or 1972.
And I didn't even realize, but yeah. Okay.
No. Well, think about that for a second, right?
Yeah.
You could put that on today, and someone think, oh, maybe early 2000s.
Yep.
It wouldn't be out of place. 1990s, it wouldn't be out of place. 1980s,
Yep.
It wouldn't be out of place. It was just, so influential in a way. And, it's again, one of these where you hear it everywhere, but no one is even aware of it, of how influential it was.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I miss the days of just picking something out based on the album cover and not knowing anything about the band. I did that so many times myself.
Spotify just does not have, you don't have that physicality, right?
No.
You don't have that record store smell.
Nope. And just the art that goes along with the music, the visual art is such an important thing to us.
And those big covers, that's that 1 foot, it's like a 1 foot square.
Yep.
And you're listening to the music and poring over all the liner notes and the last little details and wondering, who is this person that they've given special thanks to? You know what I mean?
Yep. Or, and every detail in the artwork on the cover, it's like, oh, I wonder if this meant this and this song and all those stuff, and all the stuff that you can't wonder about anymore, unfortunately.
Well, and the classic for that, of course, sort of bringing things back to the beginning of our talk, is the cover from Sgt. Pepper's.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
which is the classic, the absolute classic in terms of the cover that's been, mulled over, and who are all these characters, and what does
Yep.
it mean that they have this guy there, and who's
Yep.
that, and why is,
Yep.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
learned
it's,
about history just through that album cover. I had to go, ah, who's this guy? What did he do? And who's this?
yeah.
And yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, and it's really a shame that all that's gone, because that played such a big part, just like the album played such a big part
Sure.
in the appreciation of music, right?
Yep.
Because you didn't listen to, it's not like you weren't well, I mean, sometimes you were, obviously, but with it, at the height of the period when the album was king, let's say, you really listened to an album as its entire,
Yeah.
in its entirety, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
judged whether it was any good.
Yeah, I would always judge the album, not the individual songs
Yeah.
on it. I would never think
And
of them as like,
I firmly believe that some of the songs, if they'd not been in the context of the album, and in the order that they were chosen to be played in, right?
yeah.
They wouldn't have been as powerful as they were.
Yep.
Because the whole was greater than the parts.
Yep. Yeah, I
And
totally agree.
that's probably the biggest, the biggest problem with sort of streaming and online music, and it's all everything's become a mixtape.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. And it's anyone's only got 3-4 minutes to listen to a song, so they're not putting in a whole album, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh well. That
Maybe
got sad.
Yeah, yeah. We can bring it back. We'll bring it back.
I hope so. Anyway, good luck with the release.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for taking the time. Stay online, and we'll say our goodbyes.
Sounds good.
Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Please subscribe, like, follow, comment, and let's keep this going. So again, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, good. And if I can, oh God, hold on. I've had this.
Uh-oh, I just lost the sound on you.